The notification came at 11:47 on a Tuesday night. I know the exact time because I had just set my phone face down on the nightstand, told myself I was done scrolling, done checking, done waiting for anything, and then the screen lit up anyway. It was my mom. "We won't be able to make it to your gallery opening next Friday. Your brother's restaurant is doing a soft launch that same weekend, and we already told him we'd help set up. You understand, right? Love you." I read it 3 times. Not because I didn't understand the words, because I kept waiting for the part where she said she was kidding. It never came. I set the phone back down, face up this time. I stared at the ceiling of my apartment, the apartment I had shared with 2 roommates until 8 months ago, the apartment I'd finally left when things started to shift, when the numbers in my bank account stopped making me nauseous every time I checked them. I stared at the ceiling and I thought about the past 6 years of my life, all the early mornings, all the weekends I worked instead of visited, all the times my dad had asked me when I was going to get a real job, and I had smiled and said soon and gone back to my studio and kept going. Then I picked up my phone and typed back, "Of course. Good luck to him. I hope it goes well." I hit send. I turned the screen off. And I cried, not from hurt, not exactly. More from a kind of exhaustion. The kind that settles into your bones when you've spent years hoping that this time will be different, and then it isn't. And some quiet part of you already knew it wouldn't be. My name is Vivian. I'm 31 years old. And I've been the invisible daughter my entire life. I don't say that looking for sympathy. I say it because it's just the truth of how our family worked. And it took me a very long time to understand that the way things were was not the way things had to be. Growing up, my brother Drew was the son that our household orbited around. He was loud and charming, and he laughed too big for any room he was in, and my parents thought that was the most wonderful thing. Drew got the car at 16. Drew got the bigger bedroom. Drew got the college fund that actually covered tuition. I got a handshake and a card that said, "We believe in you," which I understood meant figure it out yourself. I didn't resent Drew. I want to be clear about that. He wasn't cruel to me. He was just there, central. And I was in the background getting good grades that no one asked about, winning a scholarship that my parents mentioned once at dinner and then never brought up again. I remember sitting in the kitchen the night I got my acceptance letter to study graphic design at a state school 2 hours away. My mom was on the phone with my aunt, talking about Drew's baseball tournament. My dad was reading the paper. I had the letter in my hands. This thick envelope I'd been waiting on for 3 months. And I read it to myself at the kitchen table like it was a secret I was keeping. Later that night, my dad came in to get a glass of water and I showed it to him. He said, "That's great, Viv. Design, huh? Is there money in that?" I said I thought so. He nodded like he wasn't sure he believed me and went back to bed. I carried that moment with me for years. Not because it was the worst thing that ever happened to me. It wasn't, not even close. But because it was the first time I understood clearly that my achievements would never quite land the same way in this family. There would always be a question, always a hesitation, always a but. Is it real? Underneath whatever they said out loud. So I stopped telling them things. I graduated. I moved to the city. I took every freelance job I could find, logos for local restaurants, social media graphics for small businesses, the occasional wedding invitation suite that I charged too little for because I didn't yet understand what my time was worth. I ate a lot of rice and beans those first 2 years. I had a radiator that knocked all winter and a landlord who took 6 weeks to answer emails. I didn't ask my parents for a single dollar. Not because I was proud. I was. But also because I already knew what asking would cost me. Not in money, in the look on my dad's face. In the conversation that would follow where he'd suggest I move back home and get something stable, something with benefits, something that wasn't this. I kept going. The thing about building something slowly is that there's no single moment where it turns. No morning you wake up and suddenly everything is different. It happens in accumulations. One good client who refers you to 2 others. A project that gets picked up by a design blog and brings in emails you weren't expecting. A slow realization that you're not scraping anymore, you're choosing. You're turning down work because it doesn't fit, not because you're afraid to ask for what you need. By the time I was 28, I had a small studio. Not a physical space. Just the business. Just me and two contractors I trusted and a roster of clients that had grown into something I was genuinely proud of. I was doing brand identity work for companies that had actual budgets. I had a waiting list. I still hadn't told my parents much about any of it. My dad asked once over Christmas how the art thing was going. I said it was going well. My mom asked if I was seeing anyone. We moved on. Drew, meanwhile, had spent 3 years working at a restaurant he liked and decided he wanted to open his own place. My parents were thrilled. My dad started calling it Drew's big venture. My mom texted me links to articles about the food scene in their city, like I was supposed to be excited on his behalf. And I want to be clear, I was glad for him, but there was something under the gladness that I didn't have a name for yet. I do now. It was grief. For the version of my life where my own big venture had mattered to them at all. The gallery opening wasn't something I planned. Let me back up. About a year and a half ago, I got a call from a woman I'd done some work for, a branding project for her interior design firm. She had a friend who was opening an art gallery space in the city, a hybrid concept, part gallery, part studio rental, part creative agency. They were looking for someone to lead the visual identity for the whole thing. The brand, the space, the printed materials, the digital presence. A full build. I said yes before she finished the sentence. It was the biggest project I'd taken on. It ran for almost a year. I became close with the owner, a woman named Harriet, who had been in the design industry for 30 years and who told me somewhere around month 4 that I had the best eye for spatial storytelling she'd encountered in a long time. I didn't know what to do with that compliment, so I just thanked her and kept working. When the gallery was ready to open, Harriet asked if I wanted to be part of the launch event. Not as staff, as a collaborator. She wanted to feature the story of the brand identity itself, the process, the choices, the way a visual language gets built from nothing. She wanted to hang the original sketches and iterations alongside the finished work. She wanted to put my name on it. I said yes. Of course I said yes. The opening was on a Friday evening in April. Harriet had sent out invitations to a few hundred people, collectors, designers, architects, a few people from local press. It was the kind of room I had spent years working toward without ever letting myself say that out loud. I called my parents 2 weeks before to tell them. My mom sounded genuinely happy for me. She said, "Oh, a gallery, how fun." She asked if there would be food. I said yes, a caterer. It would be a nice event. She said she'd check with my dad about the drive. The drive was 3.5 hours. I didn't think it was too much to ask. Then Drew announced his soft launch. Same weekend. He didn't know about my opening. I hadn't told him, which maybe I should have. But I'd learned a long time ago not to give my family a schedule too far in advance, because somehow Drew's plans always seemed to materialize in the same space. I don't know if that's fair. It might not be, but it's what I'd learned. My mom called me a few days later to tell me they decided to go help Drew. He really needs us there, Viv. It's his first week. You know how stressful that is. She said it like I didn't know anything about opening something new. Like I hadn't spent the past year building an entire visual world for someone else's launch. Like my name wasn't about to be on a wall in a room full of people who had come specifically to see the work. I said, I understand. And I think part of me did. I just wished I didn't have to. Then the Tuesday night text. We won't be able to make it. And you understand, right? I said yes, because by then I had learned that saying no, actually, I don't understand. I've spent my whole life watching you choose him, and I had hoped, just once, you might choose me. That sentence doesn't go anywhere good. It doesn't open a door. It just starts a fight where I end up apologizing for having feelings, and I was too tired for that. So, of course, good luck to him. I hope it goes well. The Friday of the opening, I got to the gallery at 4 to help with the final setup. Harriet was already there, directing the caterers. My friend Odessa, who had talked me through more late nights on this project than I could count, was arranging the sketch prints in the back room. My contractor Marco was hanging the last of the signage on the exterior. These were the people in my corner. Not blood, just chosen. accumulated over years of showing up and being real and not making people feel small for the things they wanted. I stood in the middle of the gallery floor for a moment, before anyone arrived, before the lights went all the way up, and I just looked at it. The space, the way the color system moved through the rooms, the typography on the walls, the thing we had built. I thought about my dad asking, "Is there money in that?" I thought about my mom's text, "You understand, right?" I thought, I really, really do. The opening was more than I expected. I mean that in every direction. More people, more warmth, more strangers coming up to me with questions about the process and genuine curiosity about the choices I'd made. A woman who worked at a well-known design publication asked if she could reach out next week to talk about a feature. I gave her my card and tried to keep my voice steady. Harriet gave a short speech partway through the evening. She talked about the vision for the space, and then she talked about me, about the work, about what it meant to find a collaborator who understood what you were trying to build before you fully understood it yourself. People clapped. I was standing near the back, and Odessa squeezed my arm, and I looked at the ceiling for a second because I didn't want to cry in a room full of people I'd just met. After the speech, Harriet handed me a glass of champagne and said, "They're going to write about you, you know." I said, "We'll see." She said, "I've been doing this 30 years. I know when something is going to matter. This is going to matter." I drove home that night with the windows down. It was a cool April night and the city was still awake, and I felt not triumphant, not vindicated, just quiet, full, like something I'd been waiting to exhale for a very long time had finally moved. The feature ran 6 weeks later. It was in a national design publication, print and digital, 2 full pages, photographs of the space, and an interview with me about the project and about the philosophy behind the brand work. They used a pull quote from something I'd said about negative space and restraint. They put my studio name in the headline. I found out it was live on a Thursday morning. My phone started ringing before I'd finished my coffee. Clients, former clients, people I'd gone to school with, Odessa texting in all caps, Harriet calling just to say she wasn't surprised. I posted one thing on my professional Instagram, a photograph of the spread, no caption except the publication name, and a small thank you. My mom called that afternoon. Her voice was different. Not bad different. Just different. Quieter, maybe? Careful in a way she didn't usually bother to be. She said, "I saw the article. Someone from your aunt's book club sent it to her and she sent it to me." I said, "Oh, yeah, it came out today." She said, "Vivian, this is really something. I had no idea it was this big." I didn't say I no idea it was this big. I didn't say that's because you've never asked. I said, "Thank you, Mom. I'm proud of it." There was a pause. Then, we should have been there. At the opening. I didn't answer right away. I was looking out my studio window at the street below. At a guy walking a very small dog, at 2 kids on bikes. At the ordinary ongoing life of the city. I thought about what it would mean to say yes. You should have. I thought about what it would mean to say it's okay. Neither felt exactly right. I said, "It was a really good night." She said she was proud of me. She said she was proud of me. She said my dad was too. She asked if there would be other events, other openings, if they could come to the next one. I said maybe. I said I'd let them know. And I meant it. I genuinely meant it. But I also knew that something had shifted, quietly, permanently, in the architecture of how I understood my relationship with my family. Not broken. Not severed, just recalibrated. I knew now, with a clarity I hadn't had before, that I couldn't build my sense of worth around whether they showed up. That I had to learn to fill the room myself. I'd been learning that for a while. The opening just made it visible. My dad called 2 days later. He asked how the design stuff was going. I almost laughed, not meanly, just at the consistency of it. Then he said, "Your aunt showed us that magazine. Pretty impressive, Viv." I said, "Thank you." He said, "I didn't know you were doing work at that level." I said, "I've been doing it for a few years now." Long pause. He said, "We should have come." I said, "Yeah." He didn't say sorry exactly. My dad has never said sorry exactly. But he stayed on the phone for 40 minutes and asked me questions, real ones, specific ones, about the project and the client and how the process worked. He asked what I charged. He asked how I found clients. He asked if I needed anything. That last one surprised me. I said no. But it meant something. That he asked. Drew's restaurant soft launch went fine. I heard about it from my mom. She said the food was good. That there had been a small write-up in the local paper. That he was nervous but happy. I texted him. Heard it went well. Really glad for you. He texted back, thanks, Viv. Hey, I saw that magazine thing. You're kind of a big deal, huh? I sent a laughing emoji. Then I put my phone down and went back to work. Because that's the part nobody tells you about building something from nothing. The vindication, if you want to call it that, it doesn't feel like winning. It doesn't feel like revenge. It feels like confirmation, like arriving at a place you always knew you were heading and finding out that, yes, the map was right, you were going the right direction all along. My parents not coming to the opening hurt. I won't pretend otherwise. I cried about it the night I got my mom's text. I talked to Odessa about it too long on the phone, and she listened without trying to fix it, which is the only thing you actually want when something hurts. But the opening happened anyway. The room filled. The work was on the walls. Harriet gave her speech, and someone from a publication asked for my card, and I drove home with the windows down, feeling full in a way I hadn't expected. My family's absence didn't hollow it out. That's what I needed to know, that it could still be whole without them in it. I still talk to my parents. We have dinner when I visit, which is a few times a year. My mom sends me articles she thinks I'll like. My dad asks about work now. Actually asks. The way you ask about something you've decided matters. It's not a perfect relationship. It never will be. There are years of invisible scorekeeping built into the way we move around each other, and I don't think that fully goes away. But I've stopped needing them to rewrite the past. I've stopped waiting for the apology that makes everything even. What I have instead is this: my own room, my own work, my own people who showed up without being asked, who brought champagne and hung prints and squeezed my arm when the speech made me want to cry. That's the family you build. And nobody can send you a text saying they won't be coming to something if they were never invited in the first place. I keep that in mind now. I keep a lot of things in mind now that I used to let slide. A few months after the article ran, I got a referral from Harriet. A new client, a large one, an architecture firm that was rebranding their entire public identity. It was the biggest engagement I'd ever bid on. I spent a week on the proposal. I sent it on a Wednesday morning and spent the rest of the day doing other things so I wouldn't obsess. They said yes by Friday. I sat with that for a minute. Just a minute. There was too much work to sit for long. Then I texted Odessa and Margot and Harriet. I did not text my parents first. Not because I didn't want to tell them. I did want to, eventually. But I'd learned something important about the order in which you tell people your good news. You tell it first to the people who have been in the room, who have watched the process and believed in it even when you weren't sure you did, who don't need a magazine spread to understand that what you're doing is real. You tell them first. Then, later, maybe, you let the others find out. And you watch what they do with it. That's the reply I never had to type. Not "I told you so." Not "look what you missed." Just the quiet, ongoing work of living at a level they didn't know to expect from me. That's the one that lands. Every time. I've thought a lot about what I would have done differently, and honestly, not much. Not because everything went perfectly. It didn't. There were years where I worked in near total obscurity, where my parents had no idea what I was building, where I ate cheap and stayed quiet and kept going without a single person in my family asking how it was going. That part was hard. I won't romanticize it, but here's what I've come to understand. Sitting with all of it, the people who don't ask are teaching you something. Not about your worth, never about your worth, but about where your energy belongs. Every time my dad changed the subject, every time my mom's attention drifted back to Drew before I'd finished my sentence, I was learning, slowly and sometimes painfully, that I could not build myself out of their approval. I had to build myself out of the work. That's not a small lesson. Most people spend decades figuring it out. Some never do. What Harriet saw in me, that eye for spatial storytelling she mentioned around month 4, that wasn't something my parents gave me or withheld from me. It was something I developed in the hours they weren't watching, in the freelance jobs that paid too little, in the apartments with bad radiators and landlords who took weeks to respond. You build your skills in the silence. You build your judgment in the struggle. And the thing about that kind of development is that it belongs entirely to you. Nobody can take credit for it and nobody can take it away. I think about the night of the gallery opening a lot. How I stood in that room before the guests arrived and just looked at what we'd made. Harriet and Odessa and Marco and me. How full it felt, even before a single person walked through the door. My parents weren't there, and the room was still whole. That's the thing I needed to know. That my work could stand without their witness. The intelligence I'm talking about isn't book intelligence or even creative intelligence, though I hope I have some of both. It's the intelligence of knowing what's yours to carry and what isn't. Of understanding that when someone consistently underestimates you, the response that serves you best is not argument, it's evidence. Quiet, patient, accumulating evidence. The magazine spread. The architecture firm contract. The speech Harriet gave while Odessa squeezed my arm and I looked at the ceiling. Drew didn't do anything wrong. I want to keep saying that because it matters. He just existed at the center of a family that had decided, without much examination, that his kind of ambition was legible and mine wasn't. That's not his fault. But it also wasn't something I was obligated to keep absorbing. The hardest part of all of it wasn't the work. It was learning to stop needing the call to come before the accomplishment. To stop needing someone to say we believe in you before I gave myself permission to believe it myself. I'm still learning that. Some mornings it's easier than others. But I know this, the next time I have a room full of people looking at something I made, I'll invite my parents. Genuinely. And I'll also know, really know, bone deep, that whether or not they show up, the work will still be on the walls. That's the only kind of freedom worth building toward.